to post-match reaction to the Crusaders versus the Sharks. Hi, I'm Paul, the guy behind DrivingMaul, your best place for predictions and opinion. And it finished up 21-21. That's right, we got a draw in this one. So all of that, all those picks on Super Brew will be ruined for everyone all week. And the bookies probably done quite well out of it too. The Sharks, the last African side to beat the Crusaders in Christchurch, that was back in 2014, and they've gone and got one of the best results from again, as you can clearly tell. Early on, the Sharks really got their exits going well, which was good. Got themselves kicking up to halfway on all the restarts, so they were never pinned back in their own 22. And one of the things that was kind of interesting is that actually the Sharks got through more offloads early on than the Crusaders did. That got cut out very quickly. There's lots of talk in this game from the commentators and actually also from the coaches that the ball was extremely wet. There was lots of dew, and so handling was an issue tonight, and we kind of saw that. This game turned into a battle of Bosch's boot versus the Crusaders, didn't it really? And the Crusaders' discipline in this game really, really let them down. And we've talked plenty of times about how the Crusaders are more happy to go at penalties of their own half, to give away 3 rather than give away 5, and they showed that in abundance in this game. In the end, Bosch kicked 7 penalties for that 21 points. All the points came from his boot. He did miss 2 as well. So arguably you can say that it's definitely a moral victory for the Sharks, and perhaps they should have won the game as well. The Crusaders really struggled with this Sharks defence. Turnovers were a big thing, especially in that first sort of 10 minutes. They had 6 turnovers in that first 10 minutes alone. And that was, that was a big problem for them, getting stripped, knocking on, etc. They initially started out with that 2-line attack that we've seen many teams using, and we saw them using that again, and it's been very successful against most defences, because what that allows them to do is to run so many options that the defenders are confused because there's so many different people to track, and that then leads to one of the players finding a space and running through it. And that's basically how the Crusaders' attack's been working. The way that the Sharks negated this was when the Crusaders were playing a 2-line attack, they were blitzing one player to get through, to make sure that second line always was disrupted and always had somebody on them. And then the rest of the players kept a line and concerned themselves with that first line of attack first. Now, with that person in that backfield, suddenly the ball out the back of the door wasn't such a great option, and players were getting hit in the backfield. What this wasn't was what we've seen from a lot of teams, where you have someone blitz out and leave a gap in the defence. I think that the Sharks probably had this idea of putting a guy back there, and then everyone else maintains the connectivity, doesn't leave a line in the defence. And they were able to do that because they didn't commit people to the breakdown. It was always having 13, 14 players on their feet, and in a defensive line, obviously with someone further back sweeping as well. So that's how the Sharks sort of played it today. That meant that the Crusaders found it very hard to get out wide. They did manage that for the first try. They got out wide to Braden Ennor, who used his pace to give the Crusaders some field position at last, because it was all Sharks early on. From that, we then had Taylor bashing after the Crusaders bashed away. Taylor putting it at the base of the posts. And one of the things we've talked about the Crusaders, and we also talk about the Hurricanes as well, is their ability to attack off kick returns, and being some of the best teams at doing that. On the whole, the Sharks didn't allow the Crusaders to do that because they didn't kick in field, and also they managed to have the ball quite a lot in the Crusaders' half of the field, so you don't have to be kicking deep for territory if you're in that situation. After that 11 minutes, it all got the Sharks had a 5-metre line-out maul that got stopped. The Crusaders had 2 of their own later in the game, they got stopped. Line-out mauls really didn't work this evening. Both sides managed to stop the opposition. Once the Crusaders realised that their two-line attack wasn't working, they reverted to a one-line attack, which then becomes much more of a matter of, okay, you know what's coming, and as long as you don't let them have quick hands, yeah, it's just a matter of taking out taking out the player in front of you. Sure, there is the option of the inside ball and stuff, but it's not the 4 or 5 options that they can have running off a ball that they would do under that two-line attack. And as soon as that happened, the Sharks forced the Crusaders into that one line of attack. That was one of their first moral victories in this game. We had a couple we had one probably moment in that first half where we saw the Crusaders nearly cut loose. Lovely crossfield kick from Hunt. Reese collected it. Was running free, running into a pocket of Sharks players, kicks the ball infield, but the opposite winger from the Sharks was sweeping round and collected it. And that just shows you that this was a big team effort by the Sharks. And that's one of the things we've been criticising the Sharks of, is being a poorly coached side. We didn't see that tonight. On attack, they were pretty blunt. Let's be honest. There wasn't much imagination and basically it was, okay, Crusaders, can you tackle us? We're coming at you. And the answer for most of the night was yes. And that's why we ended up with a Crusaders tackle count of 55 tackles off 62 attacks, of 62 attempts. The Sharks amazingly had to make 154 tackles, and they made 132 of those. So on attack they weren't that imaginative. As I say, it was all pretty simple stuff for the Crusaders to deal with, but on defence, that's where they've been spending their time coaching, and we could see that tonight. They got up to 7-9 just after 35 minutes, with Bosch kicking from halfway, and with that howitzer a boot. And he was kicking from a long way out. The Crusaders knew that if they gave penalties anywhere in their own half at all, he was going to try and kick them. And when you give up 12 penalties, that's the kind of thing that happens to you. Sure, the final count was 12-10, but if you think that it felt like 4 or 5 of those penalties were given basically in the last minute of the game against the Sharks as they tried to keep the Crusaders out. And you'll see that actually when you're talking about 12-5-ish or 12-6, the penalty count was well in their favour. The Crusaders did have a chance 1 minute out from time. They had a 5-metre line-out maul to score, and everyone's thinking, well, this is where the Crusaders always score. They always score just before half-time, so hey, they're going to score. No, the Sharks held them out. And again, another one of those moral victories, another one of those morale boosters that kept them going in this game. Come out in the second half, and obviously you expect the coaches to have changed up some stuff. But what do we have? We basically have Cohen Bosch knocking over penalties again. So pretty much similar to the first half. Reese did they did try grubbering through for Reese into the corner, but he was beaten to the ball. So the Crusaders had a few half chances. Another one was when Braden Ennor got tackled into touch as well, but that came back to a penalty. In the end, you might think, you know what, perhaps because that was with about 4 minutes to go, perhaps the Sharks would be letting Braden Ennor score in the corner and making a really hard kick for Hunt. But you never willingly give up a try like that. Let's be honest. So after Reese had that, we had another penalty. It took out to 7:15, and then Hunt got really lucky with a penalty kick. He managed to get it over the head of the winger, but he bounced it infield, and then it rolled out about a metre out from the line. That was one of those penalties kicks that you thought, oh, that might have stayed in field, or even might have run dead. From that, the line-out maul didn't work. But what we saw was the Crusaders giving up on that and actually calling scrums instead 5 metres out. We saw it here on about 55 minutes, and we saw it again at the death as well. They called a couple of scrums, and then they just did tap and goes and just tapped and charged in at the end. From that that 5 minute scrum anyway, in this situation on 55 minutes, Goodhue scored by the posts. making it a very easy kick for Hunt. That narrowed it down to 14-15. And at that point, the Sharks' handling really started to fall apart. We saw some real messy and scrappy stuff from them. But they still managed to get... the Crusaders were still giving up penalties, and that allowed another 3 cracks at goal, of which only 2 went over. And then eventually, time is running out. The Crusaders get down into Sharks territory and say penalty after penalty after penalty. And eventually the ball comes out to the backs. I mean, we must have had 4 minutes of the forwards just hogging the ball, bashing it up, not even using the backs. Eventually comes out to Hunt, who steps in nicely around his player and goes over to score, and then knocks over the penalty as well. Knocks over the conversion as well. 21 all, it's a draw, and everyone on Super Brew and all the pickers are pulling their hair out, saying that any game involving someone from the African Conference is a lottery. You don't know what's going to happen. We may even get a draw, as we saw here. Some of the key stats: turnovers in the end, the Crusaders 19-10 from the Sharks. As I say, very early on, it was like 6-2. So the Crusaders went through periods when they could actually stop that, but they were turning over the ball far too much in this game. They did get 5 clean breaks, only 1 from the Sharks, and that's what we earned. And from a metres point of view, the Crusaders ran with the ball an awful lot more. 144 runs to only 54 by the Sharks, so nearly 3 times as many runs, but 423 metres to 114 metres by the Sharks, 4 times as many metres. So yes, a lot more metres and a lot more, and also more effective with those metres. 70% possession, 74% territory to the Crusaders over the Sharks. I'm not convinced by the stats that Opta have done for this game, because it didn't feel, during the game at least, that was the territory and possession. Now, I guess as soon as the Sharks went down Crusaders' territory, they'd get a penalty, they'd knock it over. They wouldn't go through many phases. So that's probably why they didn't spend much time. That's probably why we got into this. We did have a period where, in the first, each time they scored, the Crusaders went through several phases, bashing it up, trying to get over, and they had another one where they went through 11 phases in the Sharks' half before they got called for crossing. So the Crusaders went through a lot more phases than the Sharks had to in this game. With that kind of tackle count, there's going to be some big numbers by some of the Sharks, and unsurprisingly, it's amongst the forwards. Osterhazen, the prop, got through 10. Herden, the lock, with 15. Waltz, Perez, Jack Dupree, the two Duprees, 14, 16, and 16. Mawur, who came on with 13 tackles, obviously the hooker got replaced very early on with a head knock injury, and that really caused some problems for the Sharks, because their line-out did not function this evening. They lost, from memory it was 4, but I'm just going to quick check if that was they lost 4 out of 13, whereas the Crusaders were perfect, 13 from 13, winning all their line-outs. Not necessarily always clean, but they won all their line-outs, whereas the Sharks, as I say, had those problems because they had to replace their hooker early on, and the replacement hooker had an absolute nightmare of a night. The Crusaders defensively, no one actually got above. Only Matt Todd got above 6 tackles. Matt Todd did 9. So yeah, a lot easier workload on the Crusaders. Most of the missed tackles in the back divisions you expect. Goodhue got through 8 as well, actually. Sorry. But amongst the forwards, only 6, which is low when we're talking about these kind of numbers. Bridge got through a decent amount of work, as did Goodhue. Both got through 11 runs each. But Bridge with 81 metres, obviously he runs it back a bit more, being on the wing, and then also shifted to fullback when they lost Will Jordan to injury. George Bridge having a good game, but I mean, no one really had much of that. No one really created many breaks. We had the Enor one around the edge. Reese got through got through a lot of work as he always does, but only got through 37 metres, which is low for him. I say the Sharks managed to control that and keep people pinned down on the whole. Discipline. So where did those penalties come from? Well, it wasn't mainly at scrum time as you'd expect, but Moody gave away 2, Alalato gave away 3, Taylor gave away 1. So there were some scrum penalties, 6 there of the penalties by the front row. Todd, Fennell, the replacement front row, and Jaeger, the other replacement front row. So again, 2 more from the front row that came off the bench. 8 of these was it 12 penalties came from that front row. And so that was where most of it came from. Jordan, Enor got through it. Both had 1 each as well, as did Matt Todd. But he's always going to be. You'd expect your 7 to be on the line from that point of view. The discipline from the Sharks' point of view, Mawira, the replacement hooker, 3 penalties, as well as having some pretty poor line-out throwing. He had a bit of a shocker tonight. Vermeulen came on and gave up 1, but that most gave a couple. But that was mainly, as I say, in those last few minutes, trying to defend their line to try and keep the win. From an attacking point of view, they really went nowhere. Esthazen in the backs had most metres carried for a back, and that was 16 metres. That's nothing. He was second highest with Dupria, the number 8, getting 31 metres off his 9 carries. It was, as I say, very direct, not really going very far. Pick up a penalty, take the 3. They really did not make. We said they only had 1 clean break all game. This was not this wasn't flash rugby on the attacking style by the Sharks, but defensively they were absolutely spot on. So there you go. That's my post-match reaction to the Crusaders versus the Sharks. Tomorrow, if you're in Hamilton, come and join me and Stephen Harris down at the Zone Sports Bar for the Highlanders versus the Chiefs. We'll be giving you a pre-match show, halftime analysis, and then post-match reaction. From there, the post-match reaction I'll try and stream live here on YouTube if you're not in Hamilton. Straight after this, we now have the Reds hosting the Sunwolves, and before that, Highlanders versus Chiefs, which is a 7:35 kickoff here in New Zealand. We have the Hurricanes versus the Rebels, a 5:15 kickoff. So, feast of rugby for us this weekend, as always. So try and catch it all, and don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, all of that kind of lovely, jubbly stuff. It's all much appreciated. I'm always up for good old rugby chats. Let me know your thoughts and questions down below in the comments.